We're funding like 250 organizations, and each of them is kind of working with 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 people that are being changed. Ecosystem awareness in a lot of skill developers is kind of absent.
Today we are joined by Mr. Ballabh, VP CSR at Bajaj Auto India. With over 25 years of experience working on issues of development, corporate responsibility, and sustainability, he has experience with both grassroots level establishments as well as large multinationals. He has core competencies in the areas of environment, livelihood, education, health, and skill development. Under his leadership, Bajaj Auto has been able to contribute immensely to the skilling ecosystem in India and improves the lives of many vulnerable populations. Mr. Ballabh, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks. Pleasure.
So, sir, just to begin with, we want to understand your background, your both personal and professional background, and what really got you into the social sector.
Okay. So my father was in the railways initial part of my life, kind of small town India, Gorakhpur, Sonpur. Was if you're watching one of those Vikas Bharadwaj kind of movies, that kind of a background. I did my master's from a place called Institute for Rural Management in Anand, Irma, and not really knowing what rural development was, where I was going. And the good thing that IRMA did was it put us for like 3 batches, 3 periods of 3 months each, practically 9 months, into hardcore development sector organizations. So I went to Udaipur, I went to NGO called Seva Mandir, spent 3 weeks. And then went back there to kind of work on a project development. And once I passed out, I joined them again to start working there. And till I think 2001, I was working with NGOs in and around South Rajasthan. Then we got a daughter, and I was a full-time mom, so I'm very proud of that. Around a 2-year period, my wife, she can blow up a kitchen in 15 minutes flat. I mean, she married me only because of my cooking skills, so incidental. Yeah. So I spent 2 years looking after my daughter, and then I got an opportunity to join Shell, who was setting up a very large multi-cargo port in Surat. It's called Hazira. So I was one of the first people on the ground. And I think the challenge was that if we have the resources available, and many of these large greenfield projects do have the resources, it just requires intent. It just requires knowing what to do. And the confidence that if you are rational and sensible and open with the community, they are going to respond in kind. I mean, they are not, what do they gain by creating an enemy out of the corporation that inevitably is going to be there? I mean, you really can't get rid of the. So I think it was a very, very interesting experience being suddenly on the other side. You kind of spend your initial years criticizing large multinationals, and then you're wearing that red and yellow t-shirt and you're on the other side. We did what was probably one of the largest mangrove plantations in the world. I mean, everybody talks about 10 hectares, 20 hectares as being challenging. We did 1,500. And with all the things that NGOs will pride themselves on, community ownership, it was done by people, local knowledge. So, and at a scale which nobody had imagined was doable by a private party before that. So we did that. And then moving around oil and gas companies, largely looking at environmental and social impact. And my favorite description of what I do is you kind of make a red arrow go down and a green arrow go up. So whatever are the negatives, you kind of try to reduce that. And whatever are the potential positives, you want to maximize that. I mean, that's basically the definition of social responsibility. So worked on that, and then got an opportunity because while my job title says Bajaj Auto, and we as a CSR team, and I'm not the leader, I mean, there are many other people starting from Mr. Rahul Bajaj himself who lead the portfolio. So maybe professionally, among the professionals, but as a team, we look after the CSR mandate for all our companies in Pune, which is Bajaj Auto, Bajaj Finance, Finserv, our joint ventures with Allianz on insurance. Roughly close this year, we're looking at a portfolio of around 280 to 90 crores. And since 14, close to 1,200 crores. And our intent has been that they should not go into vanity projects or anonymous funds. It should actually be doing welfare for society. It should be visible. And Jamnalalji, whose legacy we still kind of attempting to honor in our little ways, said, and I mean, there are many versions of it and I never get it right, basically said you keep your paropkar and your vyapar as two separate entities.
Yeah.
So there has to be a separation between the two. We are not doing a CSR to sell 20 more motorcycles or to make somebody buy a TV using our finance scheme. That's not the intent at all. So intent is you identify a need and try to work to addressing that need in the best possible way, not really if it is going to sell a motorcycle. Motorcycle will sell on its own. The insurance will sell on its own. And that if it has to depend on CSR for getting marketed, then you are in really, really deep trouble. So that is, I think, a very, very different stance from what not many other corporates do.
Yeah.
It's a very refreshing change that trying to do it. It is corporate philanthropy at the end of the day, but it is pure corporate, not contaminated by the needs of the public. Very large extent.
That's great to hear, sir, about your background and all the great work and the vision of Bajaj, at the heart of it.
Truly inspiring.
Yeah. So now, sir, just zooming into the CSR initiatives that you have, what are some of the skill development initiatives specifically that Bajaj is focused on with its CSR?
So it's actually very interesting because we almost don't do any skill development.
Okay.
As a part of a CSR, we do a phenomenal amount as a part of the core corporate.
Okay.
So we do our internships, we do all, and it's, so Dominar, which was the flagship product for Bajaj, it was the most high capacity motorcycle we were manufacturing, was manufactured in a line that was 100% run by women workers.
Okay.
So the engineers, shift supervisors, so everybody end to end. So one can say it's a gimmick. It's a gimmick if you're trying to sell the bike. You're not trying to sell a 400cc motorcycle which costs 2 lakhs. It's been made by girls. That's not, you never market it like that. So why is it a gimmick? But you're actually trying to prove that in a hardcore, high-end, technical-based manufacturing industry, you can run it using people who are normally not thought to be competent around high machinery.
Yeah.
You put them in your data server wala bank, you'll kind of give them peripheral roles. You're saying, no, they will manufacture. They will actually make a bike that weighs 200 kilos and roll it off the assembly line. So the corporate does a whole bunch of skilling as a part of the corporate. We had actually two sets of views inside the company. So one project that we do, which actually the only business-linked project that we run, we'll call it the Certificate Program in Banking, Finance and Insurance, CPBFI, which is a content designed by our professionals in the finance and insurance companies, which is given as an add-on curriculum to kids who are in the what would be called tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 towns and colleges and management colleges there, which enhances their marketability for a whole bunch of people who are looking for these kind of skills. And our success is the fact that 80 to 90% of people who get trained in these modules are hired by our competitors, not us. So if an ICICI Pro or an HDFC believes that these people are worth hiring, that is the surest test of the quality of the program. So it is not designed to be training mindless automons for Bajaj Finance. It is to actually enhance their marketability so that they are able to achieve better jobs and they are getting brilliant jobs in the campus. So we are kind of left starving at the end. We needed 100 kids, where are they? And our competitors walk away with all the... So I think that's a huge success.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways it's a template of what a good corporate designed, corporate linked skill development program should look like. Beyond that, our sense was that a lot of skilling programs are looking at the training as an outcome, not employment as an outcome. Yeah. And there is a glut of training programs happening, especially given the very large number of training initiatives launched by different people. So, and we said there's a very large gap which is on enterprises, micro enterprises, self-employment, choose whatever term you want to choose. We said that's a very large gap that nobody really is paying attention on. So let's kind of go deep dive in that. So we are working with a very wide variety of organizations in the skilling space, but the skilling is intended not to make you an employee, but to make you an entrepreneur. And that entrepreneur can be, initially it was like a woman with a sewing machine saying कि सिलाई की दुकान है, but anything and everything. So enterprises that are run by individuals, enterprises that are run by women's groups. There's just started an enterprise in Pune, which is a farmer producer organization owned collectively by 500 women that makes it's a ragi based fudge that they make, and which has given out by Annamitra, which is a midday meal program, as a part of their Saturday sweet. So these women are manufacturing this, and so the kids get a sweet made by this group of women, and they in turn have a tie-up with another FPO, the rural area, for manufacturing the ragi for producing the ragi that goes into this fudge.
Yeah.
Two sets of women, one is the primary producer, one is the primary processor, and midday meal kids are getting good, high quality, nutritious food to eat by getting them connected. So there's a whole range of enterprises. Then there are socially relevant enterprises which are being supported by entities like Unlimited and venture centers. And we have BYST, which kind of looks at first generation enterprises normally in a technical kind of a space, and getting them access to funds and to get them mentors so that they can kind of go up. So I think we have around 8 to 10 skilling / self-employment / enterprise programs that we believe actually are the future, especially in today's context when people who had stable employment don't have employment right now. So putting more people into the job space, saying they're looking for jobs, how does it help anybody?
Yeah.
So we believe our strategy, although it was designed pre-COVID, we're doing it last 3 years, becomes a lot more relevant today, given what's happened to the low-end employees in most companies.
I think you're absolutely right, sir. I mean, definitely given the COVID scenario wherein this thing of self-reliance and this vision of a Atmanirbhar Bharat is now becoming so much more prominent and important. So just I want to understand a little bit more about this entrepreneurship program you have and kind of understand the details of how that really works.
So again, like we are a very secular kind of donor in a non-religious interpretation of the word secular. So we don't have our own pet passion project. We don't have a model that we have designed which we execute. So we support partners, and we have a whole variety of partners. So people like ICCD and iCreate, they look at if you can look at a continuum of self-run enterprises. So the very first would be, widow-headed households or people without any resources and working with them. So their own capacity to invest is very low. Their capacity to initially manage enterprises is also fairly low. So you're not trying to dump onto a family. So it's also kind of important that when we are looking at interventions, we also look at the risk profiles, risk-bearing capacities of people, and kind of design programs accordingly. So there are certain programs that are low investment, low shock. They can go down and recover because the cost of recovery is not very high. Things that are self-perpetuating. So 4 goats. You can sell a goat whenever you need cash, but they'll also breed and your stock will come back to normal. They're more resilient than, say, a cow, which is the next level of enterprise. And you might have a traditional kind of knowledge about how do you keep goats in your family so that you're not dependent on an outsider to always tell you all the right things. So that becomes your kind of a very most basic kind of entry-level enterprise, which is linked to what you have been doing traditionally. There is community has some understanding. You are a part of a larger ecosystem which already exists there. So Bakri ka ilaj karana is not something that will you don't have access to Google and to YouTube, right? I mean, it has to be done locally. That ecosystem has to exist. So that is the first kind of point in the beginning, like in the spectrum. And then as you move upwards, the investment quantity increases. As a donor, our investment also has to be capped. I mean, you can't be providing unlimited amounts of, although we work with an organization called Unlimited, we can't be providing unlimited resources.
Mm-hmm.
So as you go upwards the value chain, the quality of input changes rather than our cash input. That probably largely remains, I mean, I don't think we exceed 50,000 rupees as a loan to any individual or any small enterprise.
Yeah.
But the quality of support keeps on increasing. So the quality of mentors that you look at, your ability to access other sources of funding. So BYST, Bharatiya Shakti Trust, which is a CII supported enterprise development organization. So what they really excel in is helping entrepreneurs build their business plans and then be able to sell them to a commercial bank to access a loan.
Okay.
So you might be, so this young boy, his father was a barber in a small village, came to Aurangabad, was a part of one of these generic, they all call him Javed Habib without actually having any connection with him, was a part of that, but wanted to do something big. And you see it's a salon now. It's got only French. I can't even pronounce those names. Only those names plastered outside that thing. He has got 10 people working under him. It's air conditioned. It's a duplex kind of a shop. But this was a person whose origins are that rickety wooden chair shop in one small 10 by 10 hole in the wall in a village. But he had a vision, and they helped him refine that vision, get him access to funding, make sure that he repaid that loan so he take the next one and the next one and the next one. And now he's providing employment to 10 people who were like what he was 10 years ago. So I mean, those kind of people who are now tier 2 vendors, what we call in Bajaj system, where they are vendors to people who actually then deal directly with a Bajaj. But they would actually be taking care of a component for one of our vendors. So helping them refine their idea, make their business plans robust enough.
That's great to hear, sir, especially, such a full circle story coming from a small town and, doing something for yourself.
No, I mean, it's very impressive. I mean, I was like, when you're funding like 250 organizations and each of them is kind of working with 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 people, you do tend to lose the fact that end of the day, it is individuals.
Yeah.
And there are lives that are being changed. And when you see this kind of, it's a good shock. Feel happy for next 3 days and kind of get a sense of worth. So.
That's great, sir. So now just talking about the current situation and the pandemic that we are in, how has that impacted your programs and the budding entrepreneurs, and how have you supported your beneficiaries during this time?
I think if there is a good thing about a pandemic, the good thing is that it came at that time in the planning cycle when you're planning for the new year. So by January, February, we all knew kind of it is going to be a disruptor. It's not going to be a business as usual. So as Bajaj, we did say that we will contribute 100 crores to combat COVID. And bulk of that is actually money that we will be spending in partnership with our partners. So it's not going away anywhere. So many of our partners, very quickly, I mean, they are grassroots organizations, they are embedded in communities, they saw the challenges there. And the thing is, there is a health challenge because of COVID. There are 1,000 other health challenges which are equally immediate. If you are a TB patient, if you have HIV, that disease is not going to sit the pause button switched on because COVID is happening. That disease continues. Kids who don't have access to high quality education, having a school which is shut down creates a new problem because they are switched over to Zoom, whereas your family owns only one mobile phone which your dad is required to take, invariably the dad, because they are required to show the Arogya Setu app when they log into work.
Yeah.
So I think we've been very fortunate that our partners have been looking at a whole variety of issues that have emerged around COVID. And I think this year we have so far been able to be in a position where we have been able to support it. So I think what we have done is a lot of our programs, like the entire enterprise development program, was probably designed for a COVID. So nothing has altered there. The people who are kind of going ahead with the enterprises are going ahead.
Yeah.
Out of 100 crores, roughly a third is going to go into promoting livelihoods. Because we said one huge challenge is that, so we did a survey of the migrants who have gone back to the villages where we also work directly or indirectly. Close to 70% are saying that the capacity of the village economy, of their resources in that local economy, to support them is less than 3 months. 75% are saying that, 75%. So end of 3 months, you're going to start starving. So a lot of our work right now is with partners, including Janki Devi Bajaj Gram Vikas Sanstha, which is the Bajaj NGO, is on looking at livelihoods at the grassroots, forming a group of women who will kind of bring together their chili crop. Doesn't help if there's nobody to buy that chili crop.
Definitely.
So, and people who buy it also have to be then able to access the next level market, and the next level market eventually the end consumer. So creating all those chains.
Yeah.
So I think that's been it was already a part of our plan, but it's getting expedited, and we're trying to kind of work with as many partners as we can in the geographies that we support.
I think that's a very refreshing take on the COVID situation, dealing with the externalities caused by, the pandemic and the lockdown. So now, sir, just talking about your own experience, you've had, experience with, really remote rural communities at the grassroots level. And you've also, like you mentioned before, been part of large multinationals. So what are certain challenges that we are facing when it comes to, skill development at both levels, both at the grassroots as well as the large corporate level?
See, I think one interesting challenge is that this question is always asked to the wrong person. Okay. Because large corporates almost never employ people for whom you'd use the word skill development. They're contractors or tier 2 contractors or tier 3 or tier 4. I have worked in an enterprise where tier 7 contractors were also there.
Okay.
So there's a huge kind of cascading and dilution of quality of both quality of employment and quality of skills being expected from the employee. So I think one thing we need to start worrying about is that who are you even aware who is going to be the potential employer for the people who are being trained? What kind of spaces they're going to inhabit? How are they going to work? So you can do the best safety training for your people, for construction workers. But if they are told to go up poorly tied bamboo frames without any safety harnesses, what is the worker supposed to do?
Yeah.
Right. So I think ecosystem awareness in a lot of skill developers is kind of absent. I think the other thing that we are not looking at equally carefully, if you look at it from the grassroots side, it's a huge challenge for first generation workers to leave their villages. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And you require a strong ecosystem of organizations like Ajivika to create that support network in the community to get you the right IDs, to get your bank account sorted out, so that while you are staying and working in some place, you actually get your salary in a bank, that money is transferred, your family can use a part of it for survival. You have all your insurances and everything in place.
Yeah.
You are aware of the hazards of that industry, so that when you go in there, there's also a training program, so that if you go as the person who carries that cement katagari, next year when you go, you're going in as a person who starts doing bricklaying, and third time you go as a skilled mason. So you go up the value chain, because then you will employ 2 more people who will be your chotus. And kind of takes the whole community upward. So that I think is, if the trainers focus on training and what happens in the classroom, and that person has no identity apart from the box that you operate in.
Yeah.
So you need to start looking at which community this person is coming from, how we can support that larger community.
That's very insightful, sir. Thank you for that. Now this brings us to the end of our interview, sir. Thank you so much for being part of this interview. It was so refreshing to hear about, Bajaj's take and your experience, especially in the CSR sector. And I hope that, our viewers are able to take away from this and hopefully implement some of your, great models into their own programs. So thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you. I mean, it was a pleasure talking to you.